In this video, I'm going to answer the question, what should I do with my training? And it all depends on cyclical training. All training has to be cyclical, and it really depends on where you are within the cycle. So if you're not sure what to do with your running, one of the first questions I'm going to have for you is, what have you been doing over the last period of time, so that I know what the appropriate steps are to take for you in the future. So let's detail what the different phases are within cyclical training so that we know how one progresses to the other and how you know what to do next with your training, because now you'll know at what phase in the cycle you're currently in. So there are basically 4 components of a successful cycle. Now, this can also be called a season. We could call it a macro cycle. There's a lot of different coaching terminology that we can apply to this, but for our purposes today, I just want you to think of whenever you're targeting a goal race. Maybe you're working on a marathon or a half marathon that you really want to race well at. It's going to come at the end of a training cycle. Now, a lot of you have purchased a training plan or followed a training plan, and that is essentially a cycle. So let's talk about the different components of that cycle so that we know where to go next. The first component of any cycle is rest. You are probably starting your cycle from a period of rest. Maybe you're a new runner and you're just starting to run. Maybe you're just starting a training cycle after a period of inactivity. It always starts with rest. And from there, your training evolves to easy training, also known as base training. Now, what are the goals of easy training or base training? There are a couple. Number one, if you're just doing some easy running, say right after a period of rest, after you've run a marathon, one of the goals of this period is just to reestablish some level of consistency. Your coach is going to want you just to get your legs underneath you again. Let's just get some consistency back. Practice the act of running, maybe 3, 4, 5 times a week. We're not doing anything hard, but we are testing our body to see how it feels and how it responds to running. And as you get into some more substantial base training, the real goals are building the aerobic metabolism of yours, building your aerobic fitness or your endurance. We typically want to focus on increasing our mileage. We want to focus on aerobic workouts, so that's tempo or lactate threshold and slower. And we also want to focus on gradually increasing the distance of our long run. This is our fundamental phase of training. We are working on the building blocks. We're not doing anything too intense, too fast, too hard. We're building the base. Our next phase of training is going to be the competition phase of training. This is when you start doing hard workouts. This is when you might start running some of your tune-up races. So we are going to see harder workouts. We are going to see, if I can spell, we are going to see tune-up races. And this is typically the phase of training that most runners think about when they think about training. This is when we're doing workouts, we're running races, we are firing on all cylinders. That leads us to our final phase of training, peaking. This is when you start to taper. This is when the entire goal of your training cycle comes to its zenith. You are reaching the summit of that mountain. You are going to run your goal race and hopefully have a peak performance. Maybe you run a PR. Maybe you run a new distance that you've never run before. This is where we try to get the best performance from ourselves. It comes during that peaking phase. And then after we've run our goal race, we then start the cycle over again. We start to rest. We start giving our body what it needs after all of this hard work. Man, we worked on our mileage. We did hard workouts. We ran races. And then we ran the hardest race of them all where we tried to peak and run our fastest. This is our goal race, our A race. Happens there. we have to go right back to rest. So as you can see, what you do next depends on where you have just been.
Hey, hi. Hey, what's up? Hi. If you can't tell, I have come to love the Melon hat brand. Have you heard of Melon before? Melon hats are amazing. I have been ogling over Melon hats on Instagram for a very long time now, so I am incredibly thrilled to announce that I have partnered with Melon, and this video is sponsored by Melon hats. The other thing that you'll notice is that these hats are incredibly detailed. The attention to detail that Melon puts in their hats is unparalleled. And I love the amazing colors they have, not just on the outside of the hat, but also on the inside of the hat. There's holes where you can store a key or a credit card, and there's extra padding on the inside to maintain the shape of the hat. Absolutely love this piece of art that Melon calls a hat. I hope you enjoy it too. Melon hats are some of the most durable, water resistant, and stylish hats that I've ever come across. And yes, they're a little expensive, but you get what you pay for. I have had so many cheap hats over the years that have simply fallen apart, that have lasted me a season. And what I really love about these is that they use premium materials, the stitching is absolutely amazing, and the styles are just incredible. This is like the last hat that you'll ever own, and I'm thrilled that now you can go to melon.com/strengthrunning and get your own hat, get 20% off your order with code STRENGTHRUNNING. Again, that's melon.com/strengthrunning, no space. And if you use code STRENGTHRUNNING, again, no space, you will save 20% on your first order. Thank you, Melon, for sponsoring this video, and thank you for making such attractive hats.
So for most runners, my first question is, where are you right here? If you've been doing hard workouts and you've run a bunch of races, I might say, okay, let's start to wrap it up. Let's add 1 or 2 more races to the schedule. Let's really focus on getting the best performance out of ourselves as possible, and then we can shut it down. You've been running hard for a long time. We need to wrap it up so that you can rest. But if you've been just running easy, you haven't been doing any workouts, you haven't run any races recently, I'm gonna say, okay, let's add some workouts, let's start planning some races, and then we can build out this more coherent, cohesive schedule for you. This is your training cycle with your race schedule embedded within it. So I'm gonna wanna know where you are here so that I know, should we peak, should we rest? You know, if you've been running races and you're like, oh, I'm so tired. I'm like, okay, maybe we take a week off. Then we have 1 or 2 weeks of really easy training, and then we start building the base again. We start getting your mileage up. We start introducing some easier workouts, and then we start transitioning to this phase of the training process. This is always a cyclical process. And I am often asked by runners, what should I do now with my training? And this often happens right after a big goal race. So a runner will, run the Chicago Marathon, run Berlin, maybe they knocked it out of the park in whatever distance they might be shooting for. And then their question is, but what now? Follow the cycle over again. The only thing that really changes is what you're targeting in the peak phase of training. As long as you are varying the peak race distance, but pretty much following this cycle over and over and over again as you progress through your running career, you are going to continue to progress your performances as well. Now, before we wrap for today, I want to show you how you get a breakthrough in performances. Yes, you should follow that cycle all the time, but of course, the real devil's in the details, right? Like how you improve really depends on how your base training and how your competition phase of training was structured. Now, if you think of each cycle as a circle, again, I can't draw whatsoever. And we have our rest, we have our base training, we do workouts in our competition phase, and then we peak, and around we go. From season to season, the difficulty of all this should slightly increase, so that the next time you do a training cycle, as you complete training cycle after training cycle after training cycle, hopefully your mileage is increasing, your workouts are becoming more consistent, more frequent, more challenging. Maybe they get faster, but maybe they also get longer. And your long runs also get more consistent, get longer. Maybe you're throwing in some quality running within the long run. As you are working through this process, your training is gradually getting harder from cycle to cycle, but it's still following the cycle over and over again, from cycle to cycle to cycle. So as you're wondering what you should do with your training next, number one, let's fit it within this cycle of rest, base, competition, and peaking. And then just figure out what kind of race you want to target. Maybe it's a marathon, maybe it's an ultra marathon, maybe it's a middle distance race like the mile. It doesn't really matter. As long as you are cyclically following these principles, you are going to keep improving.